Shiloh Industries is a traditional supplier that pours, bends, machines, and welds metals. And yet sales have tripled in the last 4 years. On today's show, Ramzi Hermiz, the CEO of Shiloh, talks about how the company's lightweighting experience is propelling that growth. And now, here's your host, John McElroy.
I want to thank you all for joining us on Autoline this week. We've got a very interesting show where we're going to take a look at the industry from the viewpoint of one of the major suppliers in this business, and that's because our special guest today is Ramzi Hermiz, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Shiloh Industries. And Ramzi, great to have you on the show.
Thank you for being here.
Also joining me on the journalist panel, Jeff Gilbert from WWJ and Joe Szczesny from the DetroitBureau.com, and good to have the both of you guys here, too. Ramzi, let's give the audience, for those who don't know about it, a little snapshot of what Shiloh Industries is all about. And what I want to know is, you guys have grown tremendously in the last 4 years, from about $400 million in sales to about $1.2 billion in sales. And yet you're not into all this autonomy and software, and you're into metals and bending them and shaping them and joining them and all that. What's been the secret behind this enormous growth that you've had?
I would start with, when we talk about what's our purpose, we talk about how do we make and create a safer, healthier environment. So everything Shiloh's been working on is about energy efficiency, about emissions reduction, and we deliver that through lightweighting technologies. So you have a portfolio that's just built on how do you take weight out of a vehicle, but also manage the unintended consequences, be it NVH and other aspects that are created when you lighten a vehicle. And we've targeted technology, so we are multi-material. So we work with magnesium, aluminum, alloys, steel, high-strength steels, lightweight steels, as well through many different manufacturing processes. And we've found a way to identify the market, I'd say earlier than many, with, I'll say our tagline is lightweighting without compromise. So we've lightweighted without compromising safety, sound, quality, and actually cost. We can lightweight and take cost out of a vehicle as well. So I think that's really differentiated us and has propelled us globally, so now operating around the world.
If we looked at a car, what kind of parts and components might Shiloh be involved in?
Interesting about Shiloh, we're agnostic to the propulsion system. So it doesn't matter if it's an internal combustion engine or an electric vehicle or battery electric vehicle. We actually can take out weight out of all of them. We're in your body in white, we're in your chassis, but we're also in propulsion in the sense of battery protection, as well as an internal combustion engine.
But it still requires a lot of technology. You were just telling us that you added like more than 600 engineers here in Detroit just to answer some of the questions. From an employment standpoint, yes, in Michigan we have grown substantially from 4 years ago where we had 70 employees, so we're definitely much larger here. But it is that technology play. It is finding solutions that we can change the material, we can change the design, we can simplify a vehicle. When we talk about lightweighting, we talk about the effects of the supply chain. So in many cases, we've taken out so much weight out of a component that they need fewer trucks to ship the product. So if we can impact the supply chain from an environmental side, 17 out of our 23 plants are already landfill free. And the balance are 98% landfill free. So when we talk about our impact to the environment, it is not only the products that we sell, it's how we make it. It's 100% sustainable across anything that we make. So that whole end of life of what's going on with the vehicle, we truly focus on the environment as a priority of what we do. How we deliver it is lightweighting technologies, and what we deliver is powertrain components or body in white or chassis components.
Well, one of the most fascinating comments you made was using the terms unintended consequences, because sometimes when you take weight out, you add noise, you have to make sure it's safe, things like that. Is a lot of what you're doing that almost like detective work, going, okay, I've done this, it's going to cause that, I have to make sure that everything works together and it works for the end customer?
It is, how do you break that circle? Yes. So it is understanding when you let's say an electric vehicle, you don't have the engine sound. So now you hear more road noise. But you also hear high frequency pitch from some of the electric motors. So how do you manage that sound? So when you're lightening that vehicle, it is exactly that. What could that trigger? And what we've been able to do is develop materials that actually manage both. And so on a dash panel, we make it lighter, but we also manage NVH with our Shiloh core technology. And what it also gives you is 2 or 3 centimeters more of space in the interior vehicle because you don't have all the dampening. But one of the biggest benefits to our customer was the asphaltic dampening that they would apply before. That was one of the biggest line stoppages they had in their production process. So we actually increased the pace of production through lightweighting. So again, it's how do you understand how the vehicle's assembled, how it's manufactured, how it's joined. Joining technology is significant, mixed materials, and some of our strength and with differentiation comes from the ability to how do you address the joining of a vehicle, be it riveting, glue, adhesives, welding.
You mentioned that you've added a lot of employees here in Michigan, a lot of engineers, but I got to believe your real growth is coming from outside of the U.S.
We have, 4 years ago, we had 0 sales outside of the U.S., outside North America, so now roughly about 30% of our revenue. So we're rapidly growing in Europe. China, we launched, we're on our 3rd plant. In China, we just had a grand opening of a plant in Nantong for transmission components, lightweight aluminum components. So global growth is part of our portfolio. When you look at companies like JLR or Volvo, 4 years ago, they weren't part of our portfolio, and we would have significant market share in JLR from the structural components, magnesium structure components. We're probably their #1 supplier. When 4 years ago we were 0.
How are you dealing with the competition for engineers here in the U.S.? Because just about every supplier we talk to is looking for the right person.
It's not just engineers, it's skilled trades, it's technicians, it's tool and die manufacturers. We've strengthened our apprentice programs and making them more robust in trying to recruit really from high school. We also have to find since we are a smaller supplier to many of the mega suppliers or the OEMs, we also have to create an environment where it's a fun place to work. I'll say we're very entrepreneurial. We try not to be bureaucratic. I spent a lot of time in big major corporations and public side, and it's how do you make it fun? How do you make it engaging? It's not only what you do, it's who you do it for, how you do it. With rapid growth, a lot of opportunities for new employees to do different things. Our U.S. team can spend a lot of time in Europe. We have a lot of our European team launching production here in the U.S. and China. We're going back and forth. So we're making it fun. It's work, so that's why it's called work, not play. But you do try to make it a fun place to operate.
But you also have challenges now. I know. I saw one presentation recently where they said the materials cost has gone way up their indexes have gone up in the past year. And now you also have to face the challenge of tariffs on materials. How are you dealing with some of that, and what are some of the issues that you've found, some of the unintended consequences that you're dealing with in this area?
Well, actually, it's an opportunity,
okay.
As perverse as this sounds. So let's say you have a monolithic door inner. So the material between the exterior of your door and the soft material. That door inner, if it's a monolithic, we can take out, through our laser welded technology and our joining technology, we can lightweight that door inner. Gross weight 15–20%, net weight maybe 10%. So if you're looking at an aluminum monolithic door, we can actually make it less expensive in spite of the tariffs.
So what you're saying, you can use less material.
We're using less material. So we view this as an opportunity for VAVE, work with our customers to take out cost out of their cost and weight out of their vehicle. And if materials prices go back down, they're that much farther ahead.
The margins improve.
Margins improve. So we actually view this as, while I'm all about free trade or balanced trade, we look at something and say, how do we create an opportunity? And I think that's what we have done I'll say that's part of our DNA as a company, is creating an entrepreneurial spirit of creativity, even though it's focused on a specific product range.
Ramsey, you mentioned that you work with magnesium, and as you know, earlier this year, Ford Motor Company's pickup truck production and Mercedes-Benz was impacted too, when a supplier company that works in magnesium had a fire. And I remember from my 10th grade science class when the teacher lit with a match a thin strip of magnesium, and I couldn't believe how it burned. So how do you guys deal with that? How do you protect yourselves?
You know, the first and foremost thing is safety. You know, from a standpoint of every meeting that starts at Shiloh, my management meetings, my annual or my quarterly town halls, we always talk about safety. So it was an unfortunate incident that happened in Eaton Rapids, and the most important thing is nobody got hurt. I mean, which could have been significant. But it's how do you maintain your equipment? How do you maintain your plants? How do you have a clean environment? You know, we paint all our equipment white. It's clean. It's part of how do you attract people to work. You know, it can't look like your father's manufacturing, company. I mean, it is clean. It's white. It's a pleasant environment, and you manage risks. It could be an aluminum plant. It could be a mag plant. It could be a steel plant. How do you create a safe working environment? That's our focus, and you know that. We are a very large, if not one of the largest magnesium structural component manufacturers in the world, something that we've grown very rapidly in over the last few years. It's hard work. It's hard work every day. You can never take your eye off that ball.
Did Ford come to Shiloh and say, hey, help us out in this?
Many of the suppliers, or the OEMs came to Shiloh, and we are currently launching a magnesium plant in Tennessee, and that plant is being designed and built for Mercedes and BMW. And so we were very responsive because they were also impacted. Great customers to work with, and we're also taking care of some customers out of our European facilities.
So I'd like to take this a little to a higher level because you're also vice president of OESA, the original equipment suppliers.
The vice chairman.
Talk a little bit, getting back to tariffs. Obviously, in the case of your business, it's an opportunity, but with a lot of other suppliers, it could pose problems. How much of an issue is the uncertainty there? Not really knowing exactly how this is going to end up, not really understanding where we're going in a business that requires a lot of heavy lead time.
Julie Freem, who's the president of OESA, she's been doing a great job leading and pulling the suppliers together with Ann Wilson out of the Washington office. They've really done a nice job representing the industry to bring that common view.
They've been very critical of the tariffs as they come down.
And absolutely, and they should be in the sense of how do we remove that uncertainty? And it is, it's not good from an industry to have uncertainty. And they're helping to try to drive that and represent us, I think, very well on the need to have balance and free trade and create certainty and making sure that we do things in the right order. It's complex, and every business is impacted slightly different. It's not only the tariffs, it's NAFTA. What is the direction of NAFTA's going to go, and our relationship with Canada and Mexico from an auto industry? We all have investments in certain ways, and given enough time, or reasonable time, I think each party, be the OEM or the supplier, can manage it, but we need time to execute any transition.
Would you make an investment in Mexico right now?
Yes. We are.
You are? Or was it committed before the talks?
No, even post, because there's still 4+ million vehicles produced. It's a good export market. Separate from the fact as Mexico matures as a marketplace, the growth potential within the market itself for product to be bought and sold for the local customer as their market matures is also an opportunity. No different than China was, 15, 20 years ago.
Has OESA, or will OESA take a stance on tariffs that the Trump administration is talking about putting on cars?
The OESA is very vocal, and MEMA on their position and their views.
The Motor Equipment Manufacturers Association, of which OESA is
a part of.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And they've been anti-tariff all the way around.
Yes. In general, we feel that there needs to be better dialogue, better conversation, and more uniformity. I think we'd say we all believe in free and balanced trade.
What about the German proposal to eliminate the 25% tariff on pickup trucks? Would that be something that you would support?
That's,
OES president.
that is, I would have to say that's really a conversation for our customers. I mean, when you look at, I think this is going to be the challenge of any time we have this conversation, as with many things, it's what's that net change. Everybody talks about what's the change, not necessarily where they have or what that exists. And this is a difference between when somebody says you have free trade, and free being equal in both directions, or you have balanced trade. And balanced trade may be you have similar tariffs one way or another. So it's a fine line that you have to operate on.
And what's your concern level? Is your concern level that this could lead to an all-out trade war, or do you feel cooler heads will prevail and this is a negotiations and we're going to end up with something that we can all live with?
I would say this is a negotiation. I firmly believe that this is a negotiation. It's a process, and there's different styles to negotiate. We all do it every day. We see it with our customers. Some customers negotiate one way, other customers negotiate another way, and you also take advantage of where your strength and your position is today versus where it could be 6 months. Right now, we're a strong economy, and so therefore it gives you certain leverage that you may not have if it was a weaker economy. So I think there's negotiation going on. We have a president who likes to negotiate. That's a fact.
Ramsey, as you look out at the automotive market, there's a rising chorus of saying, hey, we're 8 years into this expansion. And everybody was predicting that car sales would go down this year. So far, year to date, they're up a little bit. But as you look out, what do you see happening? I mean, this has always been a cyclical industry. Where do you think it's going?
Well, I think we have to look at, there's a few dynamics that are happening. Right now we have rising interest rates, so that's going to impact pricing. You have a lot of leases, cars coming off lease, so that's going to impact it. And you also have residual values of vehicles is somewhat down. So when you look at those things coming together, the cost of a vehicle to lease or buy a new vehicle has the potential to go up. I think that's more of the risk on the pricing pressure than necessarily the general economy being an issue. So, even if it goes down slightly, it's still a good market. If it was 16 million, it would still be a good market. So, when I look at autonomous vehicles and I look at some of the longer term changes, I think they still create opportunities. I don't see them as risks. The type of car may be different. And I think that's where we get hung up on the number of units versus the transaction cost and or the mix. And so a healthy mix is something that we also have to stay focused to. So if it's more SUVs and trucks and CUVs, even if it's fewer with a higher transaction cost or higher content opportunities, that creates value.
Mm-hmm. But rising interest rates have to be a concern for you. I mean, Shiloh has made several acquisitions over the last several years, so I mean, you have to be concerned about, and you have planned expansions going on. So
right, your cost of capital. I mean, how do you manage that? That clearly impacts your cost of capital and what you have to charge and price your product at. Absolutely.
Do you think that can slow the economy down as the cost of capital goes up?
The challenge we have is to balance that with productivity. So how do you, a lot of where we look at is how do you drive productivity? And productivity comes in some cases from investments. And so how do you manage that? So we need to, more concerning is we've slowed down on our productivity as a country.
As a nation.
As a nation. So we got to stay focused on productivity. That's continued to deliver us a competitive advantage. And I think that's where we also have to spend a lot of time. And that's where the talent comes in. You need engineers, you need technicians. So that talent development and what we're bringing through from our education process and engineers or technicians. And I'm not just saying exclusively out of four-year universities, it's out of the trade schools, it's out of the various work centers, are all areas of opportunity.
Talking about manufacturing, there's a continuous development in 3D printing, additive manufacturing. Does that play a role in your company? Are you looking at that?
I actually am extremely intrigued with the opportunities, and not just in the product, but in some of your processes, in some of your tooling, speed to market. And when we talk about how do you create disruption, just right now, I think one of the advantages that Shiloh has, and I think it is a competitive advantage, is the speed you can do whatever it may be. How quickly can you launch a tool? So we have some of our customers, just especially on the electric vehicle side, where their fresh approach to the marketplace and designing from a blank sheet of paper.
You mean some of these startups?
Startups, as well as some of the guys, maybe somebody's on the West Coast. You know, they look and say, 26 weeks for a tool, how come it can't be done in 10? What stopped? I mean, they pushed the edge. No different than Honda was in the late 80s when they were talking about zero defects. You know, us who were in the industry then, we'd like, there's no way you can operate that way. Now, as an industry, that is what we do every single day. That is how we've operated. But it is that disruption on speed. And I think additive manufacturing, flexibility of design, when we, let's say 10 years from now, whatever it may be, when we have first mile, last mile vehicles, they would be, you know, how do you make them more unique? How do you make them more personalized? I think 3D or additive manufacturing really has a place. Not yet, but it definitely has a place.
Are you looking at the components of automated vehicles? Because those add weight as well, and you want to offset that. Is that a little more difficult because you're talking about things that are so cutting edge and so technically complex?
So back to unintended consequences and where we take advantage of them. AV, in many cases, equal EV. One of the single largest or the largest drain on a battery is the AV technology. It can consume almost half the battery charge. So the fastest way to address battery range extension is take weight out of the vehicle. So with the adoption of more of an AV technology or more electrification in the vehicle, it actually is creating the need to lightweight more. So we view that as they actually hand in hand. AV equals EV, which must equal greater weight reduction.
But
so I see that as an opportunity.
But what about safety? I mean, people are probably hearing you talk about lightweighting. They're probably thinking to themselves, well, how safe is a lightweight vehicle compared to a traditional vehicle?
Part of our lightweighting without compromise. We don't feel that we compromise safety. If anything, we can enhance it. And so it is that view that heavy is better. Mm-hmm. Heavy is stronger.
More protective.
And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, magnesium is stronger than steel. 70% lighter than steel. It's stronger than steel. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at stiffness in your vehicle, it actually is a better solution, or at least an equivalent solution. So you don't have to make that trade-off. How you design your vehicle is critical, so it doesn't take away from that. But lightweighting does not mean unsafe. It actually can be safer.
Ramsey, I want to change topics completely here. I'm intrigued that you sit on the board of directors of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes.
I can't imagine that any supplier executive in the automotive industry has ever done anything quite like that. How did that come about?
It's actually, it's fun. It's a great board. It's a great board to be on. The way it came about was Shiloh was being recognized for a sustainability award in Ohio. And the gentleman who was also receiving an award was Mayor Jackson of Cleveland. And Cleveland's very involved in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So we were talking auto, we were talking about sustainability, we were talking about music, and you know, who's my favorite band, what I like. And again, like any good politician, he was leading me right down the path. I mean, I stepped right into it. And before you know it, he's like, I have a job for you to do, and I'd like you to be on the board. And he connected me with the board, and you know, again, it's a fun board, great people, and you really think about music and cars, though, they go hand in hand, and I mean, it's a fun board, and Mayor Jackson was the guy who really, I'd say, orchestrated my involvement.
How diverse is that board? Because you think of that as being a bunch of musicians, so you add in an auto exec, I would imagine there are people from other industries that you wouldn't expect as well?
It's a diverse board. And you know, I'm also involved in the Automotive Hall of Fame, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's about everybody who loves music. Not necessarily are you a musician in yourself, but it's the ability to help recognize who's made an impact, who's been disruptive, who's changed it. Because when we define rock and roll, it's not necessarily the genre only in itself, because that's starting to, those musicians would basically disappear after a period of time. It's about disruption. It is about creating something new. It is about being recognized for a change and being a leader of that change. It's not just only about the music.
what's coming with the Automotive Hall of Fame, since you have an interest in that as well?
As chairman of the board on that.
I'm chairman of the Automotive Hall of Fame. It equally is a relevant piece of the industry history, and it's one that we are trying to even expand our relevance in it. We have, you know, your most common people who have been inducted to the Hall. We have people who were a little obscure, but they created something unique or something different. The Automotive Hall of Fame, we have our induction ceremony July 19th at MGM. We have some great people being inducted this year, but also we try to recognize what's happening today in the future. So our Distinguished Service Award is going to Steve Kiefer and the Kiefer Foundation
of General Motors. For Steve's foundation's work on distracted driving. So we're also recognizing people of the past who've created things, but individuals who are doing things and making a difference today. And the Kiefer Foundation, which Steve is doing is on distracted driving, is outstanding. And the Hall is recognizing them for that work as well.
Now, with Ford's move to the old Michigan Central Depot, there's also a lot of interest in downtown Detroit. What's going to happen now with the Automotive Hall of Fame?
And we need a quick answer. We're down towards the end.
We're in Dearborn. We got a great museum in Dearborn. We're staying in Dearborn.
I got to believe, too, that being on both boards, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Automotive Hall of Fame, is especially bringing a fresh viewpoint to the Automotive Hall of Fame.
It is. I mean, I think how we look at it and how do you drive excitement is part of what we're doing. And I'm really excited about the work that the Automotive Hall is doing. Our board is a great board and diversified. It's fun. It's fun.
Ramsey, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Very interesting discussion here.
Thank you.
Ramsey Hermiz from Shiloh Industries, Jeff Gilbert from WWJ, Joe Szczesny from the DetroitBureau.com. Thank all of you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as I always do, I want to thank all of you in the audience for watching.